Greetings, Geekbeard here, also known as Elliot. Today we're going to be talking about giving women their own government and men their own government, which is a system I call sex-segregated democracy. It's an idea I've had a long time ago and I've put a lot of thought into it. I think it's the way of the future. I know that's a pretty hard sell, but let's dive right into it. Firstly, I was significantly inspired to make this video after I watched a video by What If Alt Hist. I'll put the link in the description. His video is called The Coming Incel Revolution. And he talks a lot about really good gender issues, like the fact that a lot of young guys are basically involuntarily celibate these days, and find the whole dating market to be extremely problematic. Highly recommend that video. Do check it out at some point. I might make a more of a deep dive on that one in the near future, to try and tease out some of his points, a lot of which I really agree with quite strongly, but others, well, I have my own take. One of the things he mentions in the video that is really interesting is that politics in most industrialized nations is now becoming increasingly divergent between the genders. Women are leaning more and more towards the liberal side, and men are actually becoming more conservative, which is perhaps not entirely surprising considering how the left is strongly associated with feminism, which is probably turning off a lot of men, considering how feminism just doesn't seem to stop. It wants everything. I mean, that's kind of the modern motto of feminism, isn't it? Women can have everything. And, things aren't working that well for a lot of men in our society. And I think things are going to change. I don't know if there's going to be an incel revolution like that guy claims, What If Alt Hist, but, check out his video and see what you think about it. But anyway, the politics is diverging between the genders, women becoming more and more liberal, whereas men are becoming more conservative. This is happening in basically all the industrialized nations, and he shows some good graphs to back that up. This creates an unfair situation, seeing as the left, a liberal side of politics, believes in wealth redistribution. Men still do the vast majority of real work in our society. Plumbers, electricians, builders, road workers. None of these are funded by the government. They consist of real wealth-generating activity in the real economy. On the other hand, women dominate in things like health and education, which are mostly government-funded. This is not part of the real economy, but it instead has to be paid for by the wealth-generating part of the economy. Let it hereby be acknowledged that this is a sacred document protected by the power of the Fermat hexagon. Bind! As such, ever-increasing socialism actually amounts to a massive net transfer of wealth from men to women. And we claim today that women don't need men. At least many politicians and public intellectuals do. Nothing could be further from the truth. Women are just employing the state to provide for them indirectly through taxation and socialism. Here's an idea. What if we let men keep their money and they could then spend it on a woman as they see fit, possibly as part of a relationship? rather than men just being forced to provide everything women want indirectly and impersonally through the apparatus of the state. But the trend seems to suggest that this isn't what women want. They want ever-increasing liberalism, ever-increasing socialism. This is actually an incredible sexual injustice in our society. It really isn't actually fair. And women currently don't seem to be very sensitive to that. But I have a solution. It's perfectly fair for women to have ever-increasing government support, but only if they pay for it themselves. So here's my idea. What if we grant to women a government entirely of their own? They can be taxed separately from men and thereby pay for their increasing big government fantasies themselves. This would also be incredibly good for men. Being able to express ourselves separately from women would be a tremendous boon for men. Many conservative ideas about things like immigration, freedom, and risk-taking would be revived, because civilization had much different ideas about those things in the past, prior to female suffrage. And we need some of those past ideas and values right now. The West is currently on a self-destructive course. As What If Hist also points out in his video, birth rates are now cratering. The global population has possibly entered an actual decline, and the only places that aren't declining are places like Africa and a very few other places that aren't very industrialized. Don't get me wrong, I by no means want to return to the 19th century or anything. And women should still have the vote. They would still have the vote, like they should. They would just have to vote separately from men and elect completely separate representatives. Let it hereby be acknowledged that this is a sacred document protected by the power of the Fermat Hexagon. Bind! You know, giving women a government, or at least a parliament of their own, entirely of their own, is tempting. I mean, even the feminists would surely have to agree with that, right? It would amount to women finally getting what feminists have always claimed they truly wanted: independence from men. Except, of course, they wouldn't have independence from men because men continue to make up the vast majority of the real economy. But forget about that. Feminists would finally get what they claimed women wanted: a total divorce from men. In practice, however, it would probably end in embarrassing failure. And What If Hist gives a good example of what happens when women try to run their own little society. He mentions a Survivor-type show where young men and young women were put on separate islands. The young men managed to survive and thrived, whereas the young women failed and had to be rescued by the film crew. Women given the ability to represent themselves and debate their own issues amongst themselves might sound kind of funny, but ultimately I think it would actually benefit women. Men would, of course, have their own representatives, and any policies that affect both genders would have to be put to debate between the two. For this reason, the male and female representatives could spend a portion of their time in a single house of government, debating and ultimately voting on laws. In this way, equal representation would be very much preserved. I'm very much in no way in favour of a return to a patriarchy. I want women to have equal representation to men. I just want it to be separate from men. A return of 19th century values before female suffrage might be positive. These are the kind of values that men have lived under for millennia. So you have to expect some of those values would be expressed at least in the male polity, the male house of government, or the male half of the house of government if they're gathering in a single house of government. We'd have much more sane policies and attitudes towards immigration, towards cultural preservation and relativism versus relativism that we have right now. We'd have a more effective economy and definitely a more effective military. These are all values that were admittedly patriarchal, but have survived for millennia upon millennia because they were successful in those societies. And the history isn't just over. It isn't something that we've completely transcended. There are a lot of valuable lessons and ideas from history which we should pay more attention to. So we might see a somewhat of a return of some 19th century type values amongst the males, because the male representatives are to a degree going to represent what preceded female suffrage. And, women are going to have their own representatives, and they're going to represent things that women want. Maybe they will pursue sort of equal wage type things, but they'll have to debate against the male representatives. They'll have to present a very coherent, consistent policy, and they'll have to debate it, and then they'll have to accept trade-offs. They'll have to accept compromise, not just what we have right now, which is feminists telling us women can get everything they possibly want, which is not even what real women want, it's just what feminists want. Basically, feminism of today doesn't even really represent real women anymore. And they couldn't be bothered doing that. They've never really bothered to try to represent the mass of actual real women. And that's why feminism has become illegitimate. It doesn't really have the right to speak on the behalf of all women. So you could view my ideas of a sex-segregated democracy as basically sort of legitimizing feminism, of forcing women to collectively develop policies that actually make sense, that are actually coherent and consistent and can be presented into a parliament or government, house of government, and can be debated and can proceed. And the male representatives will then, push back and debate and negotiate those policies as they affect men as well, because, things that affect women usually do also affect men, and that's reasonable. Okay, thanks for watching, guys. What do you think? Is there going to be a coming incel revolution, or at least a revolution of angry young men that feel rejected and unrepresented by the current political environment? I mean, that's really the critical point here. Is the current political environment capable, really, of respecting men, and even respecting both the genders, because as I've said before, modern feminism doesn't represent real women anymore. Gender politics is clearly kind of here to stay, right? Gender politics is now a huge deal. It just doesn't actually represent either gender. So we need to legitimize that. We need to give the genders representation separate from one another so that they can express themselves fully politically and really relate to what they're seeing on TV when they see their representatives trying to speak for them. And then, as needed, those representatives can come together and debate issues of crucial significance to both genders, like things like marriage and child rearing. There's a whole lot of issues relating to child rearing that need addressing in our society, particularly the law and particularly the way the family court systems currently ridiculously, outlandishly favour women. But it is a very complex and difficult issue. I don't think a revolution is sort of going to happen overnight. It's only going to happen if there's a possibility of improving society, of improving the system. You can't just have a revolution and say, oh, we're just going to fight and then complain and then go back to the same system. That doesn't work. But a sex-segregated democracy could be exactly the kind of system that we need to move forward to finally achieve legitimate gender politics instead of the fake rubbish that we have right now. So that could ultimately fuel a revolution of younger men. But without that, without something, it's not going to happen. It's not just going to happen out of the blue, from nowhere. There might be riots and complaints and frustration, but that doesn't not a revolution make in its own right. Well, thanks for watching, and as mentioned, check out What If Althist's video, The Coming Incel Revolution, and some of his other videos covering the same topic. I hope to see you in another video. Please like, comment, or subscribe as you see fit. This is Geekbeard signing out.